in the future. Okay, take 2 seconds to think about that. We're going to move on. I just want to get my reading glasses. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to start with Bowlby. Now, how many of you remember him? Probably remember him from Psych 1, right? So who was this guy, John Bowlby? So he actually was somebody who was he was a psychiatrist. He was a doctor, and he was working in London, and he was working pre-war, post-war, World War II, and he was working with kids who were emotionally disturbed. And what he was finding was that although physically they were in a much safer place and they were being taken care of, and that should have been enough for them to further their development, he was finding nevertheless they were kind of stuck. These kids were stuck, and he wasn't able to get through to them. And while they may have had that biological or physical comfort, emotionally they were failing to thrive. And he started to realize that while he was in an era of psychology and psychiatry, which looked at everything as internal conflicts, internal struggles, more of the Freudian approach, which everything is your internal conflicts, he said, there is something externally that went on with these kids that's creating some emotional issues here that is not allowing them to further their emotional development, and you can't get through to them. So he was the first to propose that beyond internal struggles, there are external factors that definitely impact the child's emotional development. And you could give them everything externally, but if they haven't had a specific external experience, and that experience is an experience of connection, then they will fail to thrive. At this time, so you can imagine if he was in Europe, London, post-World War II, he's seeing so many damaged children, so much trauma. Today we call it trauma. That wasn't even the word back then. Well, he would have a heyday today, but because today everything is trauma. But he was he was seeing so much trauma in that time, and he's seeing these kids, you can't get through to them. It's like a veil. What happened? What happened to these children? What was it? He realized there was such emotional damage that was brought on by what he believed was an initial lack of connection at the beginning of their birth. Okay? And that's where he looks at. So, by the way, at that time, did you ever remember Harlow and his monkeys? Remember the Harlow experiments where he has that wire monkey and it's attached to it as a bottle? And then they have another stuffed animals, probably the kind we get today, right? And the monkeys gravitated to that, even though it didn't give them food, but it gave them warmth, it gave them cuddling, it gave them that sense of being taken care of and nurtured. And that was more important than the actual food. So in these hospitals, yeah, they were feeding the kids and everything was great. They were getting chocolate, but you couldn't get through to them. You couldn't reach out to them because they were lacking something. Okay, now even as I'm going to speak to you about this stuff, you're going to see, I would wonder, I shouldn't assume anything, but I would wonder if you're going to start thinking yourself about your own attachment and what happened in your life. And that's why this speaks to everybody, because it's so real and it's so true. And we're human beings, and as long as we have a pulse, we're always experiencing things, and we always can relate in some way to the human experience, right? So let's look at this slide here. He says there's a fundamental bond between parent and child that is essential to survival and development. Okay? If you have any questions about this, ask me. Biologically based repertoire of organized behaviors, meaning the baby has a repertoire of these biological behaviors like crying, like smiling, clinging, proximity, they want to be close to you. How many of you have children in here? Okay. That foster infant-parent interaction and maximize survival. So you probably saw that movie on imprinting. It's similar to that concept where the baby ducks are following the mommy, right? That the baby is trying to do these behaviors because it's trying to get the mom's attention. Why does it want the mom's attention? Again, this is biologically rooted. It's an evolutionary process that promotes our ability to survive, right? I can maximize survival if I know I've made an in with mom and she's going to take care of me. Allows the children to relate to the parent as two things here we're going to talk about. Secure base from which to explore. You're my base, you're my home base, and then I could explore the world, right? And number two, a safe haven. It's a safe haven, a safe place for obtaining support and protection in times of perceived threat. Okay? In other words, I know I have a safety valve. Mom is my safety valve. And if I ever feel threatened, I know I have mom. She's my home base, right? More than survival, it's how we thrive. So it's not just about having a heartbeat or having a pulse, but in order to thrive, and that's what Bowlby was seeing, that, yeah, they're surviving. They have a heartbeat, big deal. You can't, they're like a piece of wood. You can't get through to these kids. What happened? What are they lacking? And this is where he understood that there was maternal deprivation, emotional deprivation. That whole concept was really how he conceptualized it, and that was due to this lack of initial ability to connect for whatever reason. When we could imagine, only knowing World War II, we can imagine many reasons why that would have happened, right? And he also said, Bowlby said, that this concept follows you from cradle to grave, okay? It's forever. The attachment stuff, and this is what I find so amazing in my life, and I don't believe I'm different than any of you. We're all the same in this concept that we always need, the human being needs connection regardless. And I just worked on this, even a spiritual connection. Take this whole attachment idea and relate it to Hashem and how our connection to Hashem, and so much of the Psukim in the Torah are about enhancing, working on that connection. So it's all involved. I just did a whole piece on that. So then there's somebody by the name of Ainsworth who came, and she took Bowlby's work and she took it to the next level. And what did she do? She created something called the strange situation. Any of you heard of that? Do you remember that at all? And basically the strange situation goes something like this, because there are different versions of it. But a kid is sitting in the room with his mother and playing, and then an experimenter comes in, and then the experimenter leaves. I'm sorry, the mother leaves. And then you see they record the child's reaction. By the way, this is done between the ages of 6 to 18 months. So it's usually done like 12 months and then 18 months. That's a critical period of time. And then so they do it, and they see what happens when the mother comes back, how the child reunites with the mother. Then the mother goes out again, and then a different person comes in. And I'm not telling you exactly because there are different versions of it, but essentially it's the mother leaving, a stranger coming in, or then the mother can leave and nobody will be there. How does a child greet the parent when the parent comes back? And that's what Ainsworth did. And she developed, based on her research and recording children's reaction to when their mother came in, she recorded different attachment styles. And we're going to talk about those different attachment styles in around 2 minutes, okay? But this is a research, let's go to the next slide, on the importance of attachment. And these are just statements in general that are going to emphasize the power of attachment. And I quoted from a few researchers. Early caregiving has a long-lasting impact on development, the ability to learn, capacity to regulate emotions and form satisfying relationships. You're going to see this now. I'm going to be talking about this for the remainder of the time. Nurturing adult attachments provide children with protective, safe havens and secure bases from which to explore and engage with others in their environment. Okay? And here, this is an important point. The biological function of attachment is survival. That's a biological function. But the psychological function is to gain security. It's an emotional security. Okay? Attachment is crucial to children's psychological welfare. It forms a basis of personality development, wow, and socialization. Okay, this is all linked. These are all related to attachment. It is achieved when a child has, now, this is important. It is achieved when a child has a mental representation of the attachment figure as available and responsive. Now, we're going to talk about that right now. A mental representation. When do I know that my attachment is working? How do I know? When a child has a mental representation. In other words, I've internalized mom, or be it dad, or be it nanny, or be it grandma, right? Whoever that primary caregiver is. So when I have a mental representation of attachment figure is available, I know they're available, I know they'll respond. What does that mean? If I call out, they'll answer. Do I know they have my back? Yes, I feel that they have my back. If I call out to you, if I cry out to you, you will be there for me. You have my back, okay? Now, move on. I'm sorry, went too fast. Okay, so what happens? Let's look at this internal working models. This is very, very important piece, okay? What are internal working models? They're distinct patterns of attachment behavior that are repeated. Attachment behavior that are repeated that help children interact with attachment figure and that provide them with a sense of security. In other words, I cry, mom comes. I smile, mom smiles back. I explore, mom's watching, she's calling out, where are you? Hannah, where'd you go, right? All these types of things. I'm dirty, the diapers change. All these things mean that they repeated, and I repeatedly see that I get the same response every time. If I cry, I get my bottle. I cry. Now, people say, my baby would cry at 5, I get the bottle at 5, and that's it. So that baby knows at 5 o'clock every morning, if I cry out, mom's coming. That's a repeated behavior, interaction that I know that the attachment figure is coming. Attachment figure is going to come to me and provide me with a sense of security. So what does that provide for the child? That process, that mental process of knowing, provides them with the child with an ability to regulate their emotions, and more importantly, to attune to others and have empathy for others. Now, this is a mouthful, and I'm going to come back to it. A lot of this is going to be repetitious. I did it on purpose because it's an hour, but I just wanted. Wait. Can I ask you something? I have a YouTube thing. If I tap on it, will it come on? Oh, it's about to come on in a slide very soon. You know what? Can I do it for you?
In theory, it should. Yeah.
In theory, it should?
But if not, I'm sure someone could.
It's coming up soon.
If you put it into the slide, yeah, it should work. We'll help you.
You'll help. Okay, they're going to help me. Okay, guys, make this relaxed. Like I don't want you. You could talk. You can interact with me, please. Okay, because we're a small group, so it's more fun that way. So this is a mouthful, but we're going to come back to it because this is so, so important. It's about regulating emotions. It's about being able to be attuned to others, to have empathy for others. What's attunement? I want to just stop and talk about attunement for a second because this is so key. Attunement, in essence, is just being in sync with the other. Now, to many of you, you'll say, duh. No, but it's really a big deal to have that attunement, to get the other person to understand that when I look at your eyes and you look back at me, I just have a new grandson now, and I'm looking, and he's so little. He's like 5 weeks, and you look at him, and he's looking at you, and you smile, and he smiles back, and that's the attunement. They get it. They start to understand that back and forth, that social interaction. That's all very, very key to healthy development, okay? Empathy, empathic, not just to have sympathy, but empathy. I can be with you, I can feel for you, I get what you're going through. It's like such a cute thing from Brene Brown. Did you ever hear Brene Brown? Yeah, so she does a lot of work on self-esteem, on shame. Her big thing is shame. But she talks about, she has a little slide on sympathy and empathy. So sympathy, she says somebody's like stuck down in a well. Did you ever see this? So, the sympathy is, hey, down there, everything okay? Okay, I'm going to eat lunch now. Be back later. And then, you see that's sympathy. Yeah, sure you're okay? Okay, I know you're stuck down there, but it will be okay. Don't worry about it. I have to go get my lunch now. And the empathy is, no, I'm going right down after you. I'm going into that hole with you, and I'm going to bring you up. That's the ultimate of attunement. Get it, guys? It's that deep connection. It's about connections. Okay. And what happens? The mental process. So, what are the components that are included here? What happens then if I have that internal working model of having that attunement? Then what happens? a model of others, I see others as trustworthy, right? I see me, you, as valuable, okay? So I can trust mom, and I must be something important if mom's showing up for me, which is very important, very, very important. And do not belittle this. Don't look at this and say, oh yeah, sure. No, do you know how many people to your right and to your left, up, down, in your communities who don't have this? To have a model of others is trustworthy, and a model of the self that I must be valuable is somebody is showing up for me. What does that say about me? They're showing up for me. A model of the self is effective when interacting with others. That if I talk, somebody's going to listen. I'm an effective strength, a power. I have impact. Okay? And what happens through these positive interactions with the attachment figure, the child develops over time this internal working model. Okay? They remain calm if they know they're going to be responded to. And if they don't know that they're going to be responded to, maybe they will, maybe they won't, well, then that becomes an internal working model. Maybe mom will come, maybe she won't. Don't know. Okay? Now, done. So, what do we find though? And this is what's really interesting. We find that these internal working models stay with us, and they form memories and expectations that the child is going to carry into new relationships with others, right? Whatever I've experienced, I'm taking it along with me to my other relationships. That could be my preschool friends, that could be my middle school friends, it's my high school interactions, it's my marriage, it's my children, grandchildren, co-workers. All this is implicated in these internal working models. And it influences whether a child feels comfortable and safe to approach others or to avoid others, whether they're going to carry positive emotions or hostile emotions. And these models are going to be the filters. They become our filters in understanding current and future interactions. It's kind of my lens. It becomes the lens in which I understand my current and future interactions, and they help the child evaluate, predict, and choose behavior. So that's kind of self-explanatory. If I know nobody's going to come out to me, then I'm going to resist, or I'm going to avoid others, and I'm not going to self-advocate. Or the opposite can happen. Because I know nobody's going to do it for me, I become an aggressive pain in the neck. You see how it can work either way? And some of the research says seems to become part of a child's internal personality by age 3. But so don't look at this and say, oh God, the kid's fried by age 3, that's it. Not necessarily, because while Bowlby felt that your histories and your memories do make up how you're going to interact, still every experience is still a potential to build a new memory. So it's not as fixed as it sounds, but it definitely has an impact, and we'll talk more about that. Okay, now I'm going to do this still face experiment. Let's see if it works. Okay, guys? Oh, I love technology.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions,
coordinate.
Intentions.
That's attunement. Remember that word.
That's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points.
Because that was a working model, internal working model.
The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay, ouch. Okay, that's hard stuff, huh? How do I get back? Thank you so much. Okay, thanks a million. Okay, so I think that is a very good example of what we're talking about, okay? Again, what he's saying is that, yeah, it's okay, sometimes the mom's busy and the mom's not getting through, but what happens here is that, yes, she ignored the baby, and you see the baby at first tries all her antics, tries her repertoire of behaviors to get the mother's attention back, and then what happens after a while, it's not working, then the kid goes like berserk, like, how could you do this to me? However, when the mother comes back, what did we find? We find that they could repair. They could repair easily because the mom's coming back. What happens to those parents where the mom's not coming back? The mom may come back, the mom may not come back. What's the message left for the child? So that brings us into the idea of styles of attachment, which I told you about. Ainsworth talks about different styles of attachment. And Ainsworth worked with the caregiver sensitivity hypothesis, which says a child's attachment style is dependent on the behavior the mother shows towards them. Okay? So these attachment styles are based on the premise, again, that their attachment style is going to be dependent on what mom showed me, what came my way. Now, the first type that she described is a secure attachment. Okay, and what was a secure attachment about? So the mom is responding to the need of the child and accurately interprets signals. If they're hungry, they want to be played with, they need to be changed, they need to go to sleep, right? There's a high quality of communication. There's an attunement, a mutuality, a synchrony, an insightfulness. It choreographs a well-synchronized dance. It's like the mommy and the child are dancing together. That's what Ainsworth conceptualized as a secure attachment. Okay, and what are the behaviors of a securely attached child? They seek out the caregiver. They show preference and explore. Again, they want to explore. They want mommy to be around. They're free to explore. They prefer mom. Now this is, I shouldn't bring this in now. You know, we'll come back to it, okay? We can read it quickly. As teens, they found, I don't want to confuse you, but later on we're going to get to teens, but they engage in productive problem solving. In other words, those babies who were recorded as being secure, you're going to see the ramifications later on. You're going to see the good or the bad later on. Those who are secure, they'll be better problem solving. They're able to assert themselves autonomously and able to preserve relationships. Let's move to the next one. I'm going to do this first though. Okay. So you have the insecure resistant. Okay, and again, the idea is that once you repair, the baby is free to explore. Because again, we don't want children who are stuck to mom forever. So the idea is, like I said at the beginning, it's a safe haven, right? But it's also, I'm free to explore, and I'm not afraid to explore because I can come back because mom's there, because mom is still that base, that secure base, that safe haven, but I'm still free to explore. So when mom comes back after the strange situation, oh mom, where were you? You know, like, where were you? In whatever nonverbal way they can say that. But mom, look at this toy that I was playing with this other lady when you were away. Look, the baby will lift up the toy to show, like, oh, I was doing something when you were away, and we can repair, we can start that dance again. That's the concept of a safe one. Then we have another one which Ainsworth called the insecure. So we have secure, now we're going to get to the insecure category, and we have more categories under insecure. One of them is anxious resistant. And anxious resistant is they are failing to get security from the attachment figure, who is, and this is a key here, inconsistent, or they're inadequately responsive. Either they don't respond enough. In other words, they're not showing enough warmth, or they're inconsistent. Sometimes mom is happy to see me, sometimes mom's nervous, sometimes she's angry. Can't get it straight, not exactly sure how to read mom. That dance is not going very well, right? They never kind of know. There is a difficulty in moving away from the attachment figure to explore the environment. And because of that insecurity, they don't know, can I leave this base? Because if I turn around, will she still be there? Not sure, right? They show very exaggerated emotions. These children, the insecure children, show exaggerated emotions, and they're tough to soothe. Again, as older children, they're going to see demanding. They're very demanding of that parent, and they're preoccupied with them. Like they just, because again, they don't have that security. So, how much do I have to demand to become heard? And you've seen that. I'm sure you've seen that with friends or whatever. They're hard to soothe. Even as teenagers, they're hard to soothe. And you'll be seeing that with high school students. Okay, they show an unremitting contact with the caregiver regardless of their degree of stress, and show weak efforts to alleviate their distress. They can't soothe, they can't come back. That was the beauty of this. You know, as soon as mom got happy again, the baby bounced back. They don't have that ability, so they're always like going back to mom and trying to get that good feeling, that soothing feeling. Again, it doesn't have to be mom, but it usually is, and they can't get it. Now, I think I go backwards to the avoidant. Another insecure style is the anxious avoidant. Okay, and what's going on with them? So these type of caregivers are usually they're usually not so excited about being mothers. Okay, it could be a depressed mother. It could be a mother who was didn't really want the baby, isn't sure about mothering. It's so painful, really, even talking about this. Like I had a case the other day, and this girl came in with a baby, and she so I started playing with the baby. And she goes, oh, that's how you do it? Oh, like you're supposed to look at them and look back. Like totally didn't understand the connection. She's very depressed, this girl, and has her own issues, but that's where you see where you get a very avoidant, they call it avoidant anxious attachment. And what happens, these children appear independent of their attachment figures, displaying no preference. In other words, they never really secure that bond. Bowlby was all about securing a bond with a child. I don't know if I even use that language. It's interesting because that's the key language here. Bonding, connecting. You have to understand that because of Bowlby's work, so much was changed even in hospital policy. For example, mothers would have their babies, and the babies would be whisked away from the mothers, and you wouldn't see your baby. They took the baby, no bonding took place. Kids would go to the hospital for weeks. There was a great book, I'll tell him it'll come to me. But he describes how he was in a hospital in Israel. He didn't see his parents for weeks, and he was a little kid. Like, all this policy changed. Today, your baby is with you. As soon as the baby's born, what do? They stick the baby right on your belly. What do they want? That's all physical, emotional bonding. They're coming in, and this is all due to his work of understanding that what this would facilitate is attachment. And if we have that emotional attachment, life is very different. This is a key part of our existence. It's the connection. Okay? So here, what happens, mom is there, dad is there, nurse is there, they show no preference to their mother. As older children, they don't see contact when they're distressed, and they avoid becoming emotionally close. Do you hear that, guys? You can imagine that. That makes sense to you, right? They're not going to really invest. They're not invested in this relationship, and in general, they do not become emotionally too close. As teenagers, like very little, they deny personal impact of parent-child relationship. They say, yeah, I don't know. My sister's a principal, so she said, it's very interesting, she said that she's not in an out-of-town school. So they had a big Shabbaton. They went out of town, and then they came back to town after the Shabbaton. And they went to the kids the next day. They gave them a choice. They said, this is what you can do. You can either stay home with your parents, you don't have to come to school, and you can spend time with your parents and then write up, using Pirkei Avos as your guide, like values of your parents that you're being raised with and that you would want to write about and perhaps implement in your own homes. That's choice A. And choice B is, this is a joke, by the way. No, this really happened, but choice B is that you have to come to school. We have 2 locations, actually. They give 2 possibilities of where the kids can go to hear a shiur by one of the staff members, but you have to be there by 9 in the morning. This is after a long weekend, out-of-town weekend. What do you think? 2/3 of the kids, they were shocked. 2/3 of the kids chose to wake up early and go to the shiur rather than spend the time, which is kind of typically adolescent. I guess I shouldn't have put that in here, but for the anxious avoidant, like, no relationship. They're kind of staying away from them. They're angry. They're harboring anger, and they're not talking about it. And what do we find about these parents? They're usually like insensitive, they're intrusive themselves, they're angry, they're rejected. And when the kids, probably what research finds, and this is all based on research findings, is that when the kids would come to them with their emotional content in younger years, they weren't really responsive to it. They didn't really care so much. Like, the kid would come crying, oh, you're going to be okay, don't worry about it. You know, just get up and you're fine. Everything's fine, and we don't want to hear about it. So that unresponsiveness develops into the avoidant behavior of the child. Okay? And many times it's just a defense that, like, I don't care, like that you know, very lackadaisical type of attitude is really covering up a lot of anger. Okay? Does that make sense? In any case, in either of these insecure styles, what we're finding is that their exploration, their ability to want to go out and look and search, is going to be compromised. Okay? Let's move to the next one. Then we have the disorganized. The disorganized, as you can imagine, it's the 4th category. The disorganized is exactly that. They are, no, I'm not here. I'm sorry. There's a lack of an organized response to the attachment figure. Okay? So it's interesting. They take charge as they get older because they can't trust anybody, that anybody's going to be there, because they're living with parents who are disorganized. The disorganized are usually, attachments are usually with parents who have been very mean to their children, really highly negligent, actually hurting their kids, as opposed to the avoidant, where they just were not there, they couldn't be there. Maybe depression more. Here is more, or anxiety. Here it's more like where it was parents who were inflicting some sort of pain on their kids. Scary parents, that's what they usually describe them as, the scary people. So they may come across as they grow up like, I'm tough, but really inside they're very anxious and brittle, okay? As teens, they can discuss, like oftentimes, I'll always ask about attachment histories in my work, but you can't get a coherent answer from them, and it's just, they have nothing to say. Many times they have absolutely no memories, which is very fascinating to me, because I'll look at them and I'll say, you're 18 years old, you're very young. It's not so long ago, you should remember something, and I don't remember a thing, okay? They try to take on a parent role, okay? Either they'll be solicitous or they'll be punishing towards their parent. Okay. Now, I just want to add here that when we get distressed, okay, so and especially in these type of disorganized type of attachments, so we need to be noticed because we need to survive. So what do we do when we don't have that attachment figure, when we don't have that secure attachment, and we're somewhere in the insecure categories? So when we need attention, we'll do one of two things. Either we're going to become very pushy and needy and like, no, I need to be heard, and I'm going to chase you and push on you until you're going to hear me. Okay, and we become pursuers in our relationship. We become maybe even aggressive. You want to use the word aggressive in our relationships. That's one response. And again, this is so we'll survive because somebody has to hear us. Another thing that we do, so either we can become that demanding person or we can numb out and we turn off the emotional heat and we just deny, dismiss, we shut down, we minimize things, and we just like kind of withdraw. Those are the two responses that the insecure attachment people you'll find. And again, it's done for good reason, so they can survive. We want to ensure our survival. So even if we embark on unhealthy behaviors, it's for a good reason. They're good reasons for the reasons we do what we do. Always remember that. They're good reasons for what we do, for why we do what we do, even if what we do is probably not a good idea. Get it? And once you look at it in that vein, you'll look at your students very differently too. You look at everybody. You look at your spouses differently. You look at your children differently. Something needs, that person needs something, and they're getting it by hook or by crook. Now let's move on. I hope I'm not boring you. Do you like this? Is this interesting to you? A little bit like, Okay. Now let's look at the internal working model and attachment styles. Okay, now we're going to take pieces that we did separately and we're going to kind of put them together. Okay, I'm going to try to link everything together. If it's not clear, please ask me. We're small here, we're a small group, you can raise your hand and ask me. Okay, so how does this all work together? We talked about attachment styles and we talked about internal working models, right? Now we're going to put them together. So the secure, in the secure category, what's going to happen? How do I see myself? The self is worthy and competent. Worthy, competent. World and others are safe and trustworthy. My whole world view is one of the world's safe, I'm safe, we're good to go, right? The anxious feel the following. Anxious was self is unworthy, okay? World and others are unreliable, because you never knew. Mom's coming today, maybe yes, maybe not. Maybe she'll tell me, maybe I'll get my diaper changed, maybe I won't, right? Strong desire for closeness while fearing rejection. This is a very big piece. You will see this a lot. They really want it, but they don't trust that they are so afraid of rejection. They're fearing rejection all the time. I want it, but I want that closeness, but the fear of not getting it is just too painful. Avoidant is, look at the difference. I'm simply unlovable. Self is unlovable. Never going to be good enough. See the world and others is untrustworthy. Rather avoid relationships than be dependent or dependent upon. So in the first, the anxious are more of like the pursuers. They'll come after you because they really want it. They want it, and they're so afraid they're not going to get it, and they're so afraid of rejection that they come on too strong. Whereas the avoidant, what do? they're saying, I'm withdrawing, I'm out of here. It's just, I'm not worthy of it, and I can't trust that the world, I'm not worthy of that love, and I can't trust that the world is going to give it to me. And then disorganized, don't even try. There's no, they're not organized. There's no organized working models to work with here. Those are the very severe cases, by the way. Those are severely abused cases. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Hold on. So let's once again look at the link between emotion and attachment. What happens to the secure? Secure individuals can flexibly manage their emotions and can skillfully distance from others in conflictual interactions. So what are they? They have more shlita. They have more control over their emotions, and they know how much to go and how much to step in and to step out. They can navigate, that's a word I like to use, they can navigate their emotions, and they can navigate, because their emotions are secure, they can navigate better. And anxiously, what do? They tend to heighten their distress with anger and pursue others in conflictual interactions. They get angry. They're the people who are after you. Why didn't you call me? I'm sure you've all had friends. Like, you said you're going to call me. Why didn't you call me? I don't understand. You said we're going to get together. And if you don't get together, everybody has that friend like, oh, shoot, I forgot to call her. She's going to kill me. Like, what's that about? The pursuers. Now, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that stylistically, you see that they're different personalities, and you wonder what that's about. Like, why am I made to feel so guilty that I didn't call you back? Why do I feel so rotten about myself? Why did that person need to attack me in that way? Or what is that neediness about? It doesn't mean it's pathological. Please, I am going to say that repeatedly. Just, it's interesting to note that sometimes it could show, what are you, insecure that I didn't like you? So I didn't call you. You could have figured I was busy. Do you see what I mean, guys? Does it make sense to you? Okay? And the avoidant, okay, they're not going to talk a lot. They don't speak a lot. They don't communicate their anger and distress. They just kind of step back. They don't get involved. They just stay away. They don't invest emotionally because they don't want to get hurt. It's not worth it. And since I'm not worthy, you didn't call me because you don't think I'm worth it. Okay, I get it. And I'll just, it's okay. You see the difference? Now, let's go to the neuroscience of connection. Now, this is really interesting. What happens from a neuroscience perspective? So, what happens when there's a secure attachment? So, stress hormones are reduced. What are those stress hormones? They're epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. I'm calm because I'm secure. I don't have that stress. I'm not anxious, right? That's real. All these hormones, all these neurotransmitters, they're really going on in our body. A lot of our behaviors are being fueled by these neurotransmitters, and it's stemming from those early attachments, okay? What happens when I am secure? I have an increase of dopamine. And because I have more dopamine, I have better attention. I have better concentration. I can enjoy. I can enjoy pleasure. What else does it increase? It increases our serotonin. Serotonin is happy. It reduces our fear and our worry. Secure attachment increases our oxytocin, which makes us, oxytocin is the mommy drug, the nursing drug, right? It makes us feel more trusting, creates trusting and more bonds. And this is an interesting fact. We process that emotion in a matter of milliseconds. The brain is working so fast to respond to what's going on around us. So if I see somebody looks at me like in a funny way, boom, my brain is, the fear circuits are going. Somebody smiles at me, I'm going to smile. We're going to talk about mirror neurons in a second. Let's go to the next slide. Who are the vulnerable groups? Okay, I'm not going to even go to this. Now, let's take a second and let's move to attachment in school functioning. So until now, we've just been talking about the attachment literature and the different attachment styles, and I hope that was all clear. Now we're going to talk about what happens in school, and we're going to talk specifically of how does attachment relate to school performance? Meaning, if I am securely attached or insecurely attached, how is that going to relate to my school performance? And how do teacher relationships affect school performance? Okay, that's you guys. You're the teachers. Okay, so let's look at this Minnesota, hold on, where am I? Okay, so let's talk about this Minnesota longitudinal study. And this was a very important study because they followed so many subjects. You had hundreds of students who were, or kids who were watched. They looked at kids from the time of that they were evaluating their attachment styles, and they went straight through to adulthood. And what they found was that academically, the insecure kids were not performing. In other words, they evaluated insecure and secure groups, and they found they're not performing as well as their secure counterparts in various domains. And they try to figure out why is that they're not performing in so many academic domains as well as the secure group. What's going on? So they tried to look at specific areas. And they looked at the areas of social competence, emotional regulation, and the willingness to accept challenges. Willingness to accept challenges and independence, which is very interesting. So they were trying to see what's feeding into what's linked to what moderates what. All these things were things that they looked at domains that they looked at very intensely. And so first let's look at self-reliance. That would be independence. How problem solving, independent, how independent were these kids? And they saw that there's a very big difference in terms of secure children being much more independent. They're much more willing to try new things. Even in a nursery setting, they went as young as nursery settings and seeing which kids were clinging to the teachers, which ones were more willing to go and search and play with new toys, things like that. Who were the independent children? So they saw that was very much a domain that made a difference if the child was secure or insecure. Then they looked at social competence, and they found that securely attached kids were certainly more socially savvy, more confident. Even in preschool, they were more empathic. They showed more empathy. In middle school, they had better relationships with their peers. They can navigate those relationships in a much more sophisticated way. They were more reciprocal in their playing. As adolescents, again, in their social competence was so much better in terms of how they could navigate the social encounters, even with opposite gender. They were just better in general. They were better at showing vulnerability. And they even showed that in adult, again, that's how far, this was a longitudinal study, which means they followed them straight through. And they could see that even in their adult romantic relationships, there was a totally different emotional tone to their relationships. It was just different. It was qualitatively different because they had that social competence. Then they looked at the other domain they looked at. I'm only taking 3 because these are the relevant ones that they looked at. Again, I just want to repeat, just for purposes of clarity, they noted that insecure academically did worse than the secure. To figure out why, they looked at their social competence, they looked at their independence, meaning their self-reliance, and they looked at their emotional regulation. Emotional regulation, they found is, again, how do you regulate yourself? We're going to talk more about that right now. And they found, once again, that they were more confident, they had higher self-esteem, more self-confidence, more ego-resilient, more flexible at bouncing back in stressful situations, okay? Now, So that's what they looked at. Now, what is the link between emotions and learning? Okay, so if I say they're not as good, so they're not as socially competent, they're not as good in problem solving, and they're not as good in, they're not as independent problem solving, and they're not as good in emotional regulation, how does that pertain to learning? So that's what I'm going to show you now. I just want to be clear that that's what I'm showing you now. Okay? So this is what we found, that aspects of cognition, think of it, cognition are the thinking that we're doing, that we need to do schoolwork, that we need to learn with, they're affected by processes of emotion and subsumed in those processes. What does that mean? It means that if emotionally I'm off, it's going to affect my ability to learn, because some of my learning, some of the learning processes that need to happen that I tap into in order to learn are affected if I'm not emotionally regulated. That makes sense, right? So they include learning, attention, memory, decision making, right? So what is more important for a mammalian brain? The mammalian brain needs to feel safe. That is the most important thing we're looking for. If I'm not safe, then my learning is affected, because if emotionally I'm nervous all the time. So if you have a kid in your class who's really nervous or anxious about something, do you think they're going to have the brain space for attention and memory and problem solving? No, they're not, because the most important thing to them is being safe, not, you know, worrying about what the history teacher is saying.
And that would also apply, sorry to interrupt, that would also apply to any other emotional things. Like, there's a girl in my class with like severe test anxiety and other things like that, which may or may not be connected to her attachment style.
Right.
It would also have that impact because of this.
That's right. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, so secure and nurturing environments build our brain's neuronal circuits and allow the brain to acquire the capacity to organize itself as a child matures. In other words, all these things of the nurturing environment, all the circuitry in our brain is much more able to mature and to process in a better way. Whereas if my brain is frozen or dysregulated because of the emotions, then everything is affected. It's all interconnected at some level. Okay? So this is how the emotional regulation affects my academic performance. Okay? And it's also going to affect your social competence. Okay? Not encouraged to develop social dialogue. You're more negative. So when it comes to social competence, I'm going to repeat this probably, but the idea of more negative, feeling more negative, is that in this one? Is this 19? Go to the next slide. Okay. So if I'm more negative, then I'm not going to, once again, socially incompetent. I'm not going to feel like I'm liked. I'm going to be negative in my attitude, okay? They're not going to develop a social dialogue. All these things are going to affect my learning. Their frontal lobes, what they find is that their frontal lobes are affected because of their emotional arousal. And that affects, once you don't have those frontals working well, it affects attention, memory, and learning. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, you're saying, like, if a person doesn't feel like they're liked, I feel like this happens a lot with kids, that if they sense that the teacher doesn't like them, either from something real or just in their head, they think the teacher doesn't like them, it can really cause them to check out of the class.
100%. We're going to get to that. We're for sure going to talk about that, but that's a key. That's a key piece here, for sure. And they've done a lot of studies on that. One of them is they see that, all right, we'll get to it in a minute, but good. I'm happy you're on the right course here. Okay. So again, what we're saying is that the attachment is the foundation of emotional regulation. Okay. The mirror neurons, did you ever hear of mirror neurons? They're very interesting. Mirror neurons help encode information about the outside world and about goal-oriented goal-oriented behavior. And this is all part of what is emotional regulation about. Mirror neurons mean that when I'm looking at you, they found a patch of neurons in the premotor cortex. And this was a discovery a few years ago, and they found that these specific neurons are responsive or activated in social situations, and they help you read those social situations. And if you're smiling at me, oh, I'm smiling back. In other words, it's a mirror neurons. If you're happy, I'm happy. If you're sad, I'm sad. If you're disappointed, if you're not there, then I'm checking out too. It's a mirror neurons. That's how we learn how to act socially. They even say, and I don't know if they've proven it, they may have, but in autistic children, they're finding that they're not as alert. These neurons are not as activated as they should be in their brains. They're lacking that, which may account for their lack of social ability. Okay? So the mirror neurons help encode information about the outside world. Okay? About goal-oriented behavior. It enables us to emulate, to understand, and empathize with others. I'm looking at you and you're looking at me. We're interacting. It's essential for children's socialization. What happens with toxic stress? This is very important. Constant activation of the body's stress response system due to absence of caring, stable relationships with adults, especially during sensitive periods of early development, can be toxic to brain architecture and other developing organ systems. When you don't have that, when I'm stressed out because I don't have that stability in my life, then it does really make a difference. We're saying even in the brain architecture, and our whole neuron, the whole system of connections becomes off, okay? Connections in brain are reduced or lost, making it harder to learn effectively because our brain is constantly making connections, and when there is nothing going on, then those connections are dying. They need to be activated. Those are very scary thoughts, but you can work with them, but we're not here to say, oh, this is over. We're here to say, wow, you have a lot of power. You have a lot of power in this room right here, because there's a lot you can do here. Emotional regulation spills into the classroom, okay? So let's look at the willingness to accept challenges. A lot of kids who don't have that emotional regulation are easily frustrated. They're tense, they're anxious, they're dependent, they're passive, they're helpless, they're preoccupied. Hard to get to them. Okay. Social competence, the link between parent-child attachment and children's social competence in school is found from preschool to high school and from low-risk to high-risk populations. These are all research studies. Okay, attachment and social competence. We also looked at ADHD-like behaviors, psychopathology, and delinquency. Again, they're at higher risk for many of these things because they're more anxious and they're seeking out that attention. Or they just give up and they shut down. So what I wanted to talk about is also, I just want to add here, they say that kids across the school years, kids who are pro-social tend to have higher grades and better test scores than antisocial kids. Tend to. It's not a must. They just tend to do better. Social competence is a foundation to academic achievement because schooling is a social endeavor. You ever look at it that way? In other words, even if they're just socializing with you, but socializing in school, what does bullying do to kids? I cannot tell you what bullying can do, how it can affect how they did in school. They just couldn't be around. That lack of social competence or the bullying, which made them feel so small, it really does affect their ability to learn and to be competent in school. And it could be as simple as something like modeling, because the parents of the secure kids They model warmth and sensitivity and connection. So what's going to happen? The kids are going to model that also. They're also going to be sensitive. They're going to be spotted. Even in a preschool, you can spot those kids. They're just more socially savvy. They get it. They know their space. My little granddaughter said to another one, she's 2.5, she said, I need my space. You need to move away from me. She said that to like another grandchild. It was very cute. Like she understood. I need my space. Like, you know, should understand that. Emotional regulation. Secure child will know when it's too much for them. And they also know that I can turn to my mother. My mother will say, yeah, you're right. You're right. You know, tell them to move away a little bit. You need that. And so even if they encounter frustration, there's something they can do about it. They know they have that bond in their brain that says, just tell mom and she'll do something about it. Or they feel that I am worthy, I deserve space, and I am effective, I can ask for space. Go ahead.
What about those kids who are like over dependent on their parents? Is that connected to this at all? Like I have students who like, they'll have their parent contact the teacher even though I see them every day, and like sometimes I feel like they should be mature enough to like handle certain things, but they just rely on, they tell their parent when there's a problem as opposed to handling it. Right. So I think again, it's very hard to answer that because it depends. We have a problem in our culture in that, you know, with these helicopter parents who have to, you know, swoop down and save the day, and we're teaching our kids that. And what's the message you're telling your kids? You can't do it on your own. Right. And it's lethal. It's ridiculous. I had a parent who wrote me a note recently, like the morning of a quiz, like, oh, my daughter didn't study enough. She's not prepared for the quiz. Please have her take it another day. So I told the student, I said, thank you for having your mom write a note. Please take the quiz anyway, and we'll discuss afterwards what we're going to do about it. No. Because I didn't want the student to feel like, oh, if I didn't have time to study, then I could just have my mom save me. That's right. That's right. But you're going to be fighting a very strong current, right? Because that's not the style. I know people who go into doctorate programs and their parents are filling out the applications. Like, what are you saying? What are you doing? Are you kidding me? Like, what's that about? So it's very cultural. It's not that the kids can't. It's not that the kid wasn't securely attached. It could be very securely attached. Just mom is bored and she wants to fill out applications, or she never got to go to school, so she's doing it for a kid. I don't know what it is. You know, it's whatever. It's interesting and it's an issue. But like I always say, eventually, you know, they're going to have to grow up. So you're just putting off the inevitable. The child. The parent is, you know, get it. It's okay. But it's interesting to note that, how we love so much, right? It's all right. That may be our own insecure attachment. Who knows? Who knows where it's coming from in the parents, or their need to feel like they have a place. We all have our own stuff. Everybody has their stuff. It's okay. We all are human. We all have our different things.
Yeah, but it also depends on the teacher, because I remember telling my kids, tell your teacher that you had a wedding and you weren't able to study, so could you take the test at another day to talk? And she says, my teacher won't listen to me. She needs a note from the parent.
Right.
So it goes
100%. That is true as well. That's true. Okay, so what do different attachment styles look like in the classroom? Again, some of this you may find is repetitious. I don't mean to bore you. I'm just going to run through it with you. Okay, so what does the secure kid look like in the classroom? They have higher academic achievement. They're going to be better at problem solving, right? They're more curious, self-regulative, cooperative, socially empathetic. This is all stuff we kind of said, right? The insecure, they don't trust that the teacher will help, so they avoid tasks. Their self-reliance inhibits creativity and exploration, hence underachievement, okay? This is interesting. 1/3 to half of children have an insecure relationship with at least one parent, which is a little bothersome to hear, but it means that on some level, many people are dealing with this. This is not something that, oh, it's out there, but we're never going to see it. You're going to see it all the time, okay? So the question is, can teachers really disconfirm the insecure child's internal working model? What can you really do about it? Okay, So O'Connor, one of the researchers I'm quoting here, when they can establish a secure relationship, these children fare better socially, emotionally, and academically. So you're on, guys, okay? This is for you, teacher-student fit. It's knowing some kids are going to be easier than others to connect to. You're going to have kids in your class you're going to like right away, and you're going to have kids in your class who you're going to say, yuck, get me away from them. I hope they don't come up to my desk, right? Difficult for teachers to establish secure relationships with them, right? And that is going to affect how effectively we teach a child, and in turn affects a child's ability to learn. Who just said that? You said that, right? That's what you said. Does that make sense to everybody? And it's, you know, it's the irony is you like the socially attached kids, the securely attached kids by nature. They're probably the kids you gravitate to, but they're the kids who really don't need you as much. It's the kids who are hard to like and hard to connect to, who are the ones who probably need you the most, and who you really have the, if you can overcome what you're going to see is your stuff in terms of being able to attach to them. And I'm just, you know, I'm going to run through this pretty quickly, but teachers and school success, and attachment, being attachment figures. So what in a nutshell, what the research really showed is that in the younger years, the teachers probably play more of an attachment role. So if you have a 3-year-old preschoolers, right, and they're coming off of a poorly attached relationship, then the teacher probably holds much more of a role as an attachment figure. As a kid gets bigger and goes into elementary school, they have found that the relationship with the teacher does help the children perform better. Close relationships with teachers are associated with improved academic and social emotional functioning among children with behavioral and demographic risk. Okay, so when you're taking kids who really are deficient in many ways and you put them with a good teacher, then it's going to make a difference in their academic and social functioning, because they're relying more on the teacher to serve in that attachment role. Are they ever an attachment figure? No, more in the very early years, but later on, they're still there as attachment, not figures like the primary caregiver, but they're there to provide an attachment relationship. So they're ad hoc. We call them ad hoc attachment figures. They're not the real thing, but those new relationships are going to help, and it's going to help them academically. So you're going to have a range like this. Can say teacher-child relationships are analogous to their original mother-child attachment relationship. Analogous, not exactly the same thing, but they provide many of the ingredients that a kid needs. You got to figure, if a child is spending so many hours of their day in school, then your impact is great. The parents are, yes, that initial relationship was there, but is there power to fill it, even as Bowlby said, to reorganize it in some way due to a powerful teacher relationship? 100%, especially if the child is spending so much time in school. That's the hope here. It's creating new memories, new experiences. Yes, the child may still look at it out of the lens of that insecure attachment, because those were the formative relationships, but hey, I'm getting new information, and the brain is constantly working to reorganize itself. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just like about what you said before, like it's usually the kids that are like harder to like, that need. So, and then you were saying like how it's getting, is it like in order to like connect to those girls that it's harder to connect to, does that have to do with probably your own attachment style? Or
Yes, and I'm going to get to that right away. Excellent, yes, yes. There are research studies that really did look into that, like how your own attachment style is. I had somebody say to me the other day, a teacher said that the bully she's so afraid of the bully in the class because she was bullied, you know? If I'm insecure, and what happens when the kids pick up on the insecure teacher and they know about it and they're able to really have a good time with them. So your own, that's why it's so critical and for a teacher to have a good sense of this stuff. This is not just for the student, this is for you to think about, like, what's my attachment like, what's my history like, and what teachers did magic on me. We know the power of the teacher, story after story. You know, we know how important it is, how a teacher can change the life of a student. We've heard tons and tons of stories about this, and it's all true. They have studies about this. Kwai study, which I suggested you read, is all about that. These kids who were resilient despite the fact that they were poor, they had poor parenting, poor attachment, everything. What made them turn out okay? You needed one person who believed in them and said, no, you can do this, you're amazing, okay?
I think it's funny because like one of the students that I've had a hard time connecting to for a lot of reasons, like when I met her mother at parent-teacher conferences, like I sort of understood her even like better because I felt like something, I don't know, like the apple isn't far from the tree kind of thing. Like I just felt like something was off, like with her mother also. So I don't know, it was very interesting. So maybe it has to do with attachment also.
Yeah, and so again, you're forming, that's a good comment, you're forming new attachments with these kids, their attachment relationships. I'm going to skip a little because it's getting late, but you should know that even in high school, it's most key. And what the research is showing is that the experience of the student, or the student's performance is very much linked to how much the teacher believes in them. So you might not think this. You might think, oh, high school, they don't even care about the teacher. No, that's not true. If anything, your belief in them is, if anything, improves and increases their sense of competence, their sense of security, and hey, that teacher is expecting an A from me. She thinks I can do history well, or whatever you teach. What were the subjects you said? Navi, she thinks I'm good in Navi. I'm going to prove it to her. So it's just the opposite. It's the motivational piece that you provide in believing in them and showing up for them and talking to them and asking them how they were. All these types of things are building attachment. So you indeed are building attachment relationships with them. Here, I'm going to show you that slide. Now, I don't want to do preschool. There's no preschool. There's no elementary. Here, teacher-child relationship is more implicated in children's motivation to academic success. Studies find that the teacher-child relationship determines students' attitudes about school and their coursework. Secure teacher-student relationships may protect children from antisocial behavior like aggression and drug use. That's huge. Those are huge findings, right? Positive teacher-student relationships impact social standing and peer relationships, which in turn affects self-esteem and self-efficacy. We know that. If you like the kid, the others are going to look at the kid differently. Isn't that true? This is all you've seen. You may be new teachers, but those of you who've taught for a while, haven't you noticed this? That once you like the child, then the others are going to like the child. That improves their social competence and their self-esteem and self-efficacy. So I want to get to this slide. Studies of middle and high school students have shown that students shape their own educational expectations from their perceptions of their teachers' expectations. Due to the influences of expectation and motivation, expectations can be an important factor on a student's academic achievement. What do they expect from me? So, antecedents of secure teacher-student relationships. Okay, you need caring, you need sensitive, you need positive interactions. Okay, that we know. Being well prepared for class, right? Because what happens if you're well prepared for class? You're calmer, right? You're more available. Again, a lot of what attachment is about is how available is that primary caregiver. And in our relationships, I'm doing marital therapy with attachment. It's all about how available is a couple there for one another. It's availability. You're more available as a teacher, right? if you're coming in prepared, if you know what you're doing, if you're walking in and you're looking at your notes and you have a stomachache because you're not sure what you're teaching that day, yeah, you're not going to have that much space, availability to be attuned, going back to that word attunement, to the students. Also, showing their real self. Who are you? Bringing yourself to the classroom. You wield a lot of power here. You have to be honest with who you are. Many times teachers come in and they're really insecure about themselves, so they can't connect well because they're really too insecure themselves. It is kind of, sometimes it means just getting a little help for yourself to see, like, who am I in that classroom? And the only way you can do that effectively is if you yourself are healthy. And it's normal. We're all human. So coming back to that idea, we all have our stuff, and it's making sure we're not bringing it into our classroom. And if we need to, some teachers, and I've seen it over the years, where they need to play a power game with students. Really, it's because they're insecure, so they take it out in the classroom. My brother's a principal, and he always says, a classroom could be a very dangerous place because that teacher closes the door, and nobody's coming in. Or maybe an SKA, you know, the administration comes in to check in. But many times, that teacher can do really wild things in that classroom. They can do a lot of maneuvering and a lot of manipulating if they're not healthy. And it's really making sure that the teacher is healthy and being aware of yourself. It's a self-awareness to know, you know what? I get a little too angry at that kid. What is that kid bringing out of me? It's going back to those first questions we asked when we started. What does that kid bring out of me? Why does that kid get under my skin? Or maybe I favor students. Do I favor? Am I being fair? Am I being even-handed in the classroom? Do I get too angry? Am I too strict? Am I too controlling? Am I not there? Am I not bringing myself? Am I still, you know, at home worrying about my kid's diaper that I'm not in the classroom? There's so many factors involved, but the kids, what we're seeing is students pick up on that, and that affects your ability to attach. So whatever attachment we have here, it is affected by what you're bringing to the classroom. It's being aware of your own attachment styles, being aware of, this is all what we said. Okay, let's move on. And this study just showed, interestingly, which is not showing up here, I don't know why, that there's a significant association between student-teacher attachment and characteristics. I don't want to do this. Okay, basically, how you see yourself and how you were attached is going to affect how you teach and how you attach to your students. It's all linked. This study showed it, but I'm not going to go into that because we don't have that much time. Just go to the next one. Okay. All right, so this is very much just in some of what we talked about, how attachment theory shapes the way we conceptualize the teacher-student relationship and the affect that takes place between the student and the teacher very much mirrors on some level parent-child. Are you there for me? Do you care about me? If I call out to you, will you have my back? Will you care about me? It highlights to us that we need the teacher to be sensitive, to be responsive. And also we have to think about interventions that are aimed at improving teacher-child relationships. So like they have something very popular today called PACE. It was formed by this guy named Dan Hughes, and it's a parenting technique to help children who have not had, who have had some sort of trauma or have not had a good attachment history. And it's based on playfulness, that the parent learns to be more playful with the child. Acceptance, that's for the A. Acceptance, accepting the child, accepting what they're going through. C is for curiosity. I'm curious. Tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what's going on. Not judging, just wanting to know, wanting to get to know the child, making the child feel totally safe to be themselves and to turn to you. and empathy. The E is for empathy, where you're empathizing with the child. Wow, that must really hurt. I'm with you. I'm going to help you through this. When you feel sad, I feel sad, and I want to be there for you. So my daughter, who's a psychologist as well, said she has a friend who's taking this model of PACE, and she wants to adapt it to the classroom, which is a very smart idea. Like really getting to know your students. Now, I know this is very hard because you have like a 45-minute slot to teach them. And it seems like this is an impossible type of task. We're not talking about this on a large scale, but I'm telling you, one sentence, which really takes one sentence to a child, which takes really 2 seconds to say, how are you doing today? Or you look sad today. Everything okay? That's connection, guys. That's bonding. And that's what we're talking about here. I just thought this was very interesting. I really want to end with this slide and this just sum up what we did. But what I found interesting here is that there's a bonding that takes place actually to the school. And this, I think, is very relevant for SKA, because I think the school really thrives on this concept that it refers to a sense of belonging at school and having a network of relationships with peers and teachers. That's a different kind of attachment, you see? But that is a reparation, that repairs, that soothes, that creates, again, that rewires the brain to all these things. The concept of attachment is, even if that initial wiring took place, new relationships can always rewire the brain. That is the key take-home lesson. To look at your students as a work in progress, that, yeah, they're coming to you, and what you're seeing are attachment styles, sometimes wonderful, sometimes not so wonderful, and you're saying, what can I do? What can my attachment relationship do to improve or to create those new connections? What can that do for the student? And that's your power as a teacher. That's pretty amazing power if you think about it. It's pretty awesome. So I want to just sum up the ideas that we discussed today. Okay, so attachment theory teaches us the power of the experience of feeling safe and connected, and the powerful results that ensue when we don't feel connected. Okay, we understand how attachment affects the child's emotional system and how that relates to their ability to thrive in an academic and social setting. So the question is, are teachers attachment figures? So for some children at critical ages, they may be. Are they ad hoc attachment figures? Ad hoc, yeah, oftentimes they are, teachers are. Are they important as supportive agents in a child's life? That is most definitely. Supportive agents, you're very important. But I think there's another important take-home message, and this is it. When we look at our children in a classroom, what I want you to walk away from here, it's not just a project that you have to teach them information, and not is this pain that I have to tolerate to get through my curriculum. But what I want you to be more aware of is that everybody comes to you with their own attachment history. Some are charmed and some are not so charmed. And if you keep in mind that 1/3 to a half of students have an insecure relationship with at least one parent, wow, that's pretty intense a thought. It's pretty scary. Now, you can't change that. It's true. You can't change any of that. You can't change their family. You can't change their parents. Any of those circumstances are beyond your control. But remember that learning for these kids is not the first top priority on their list. It's not their top priority. It may not even be on their list because their emotional states are blocking them from being able to effectively process and organize information. You have to remember that. They can't really learn. That was that whole Minnesota longitudinal study. That's what it's trying to show you. There's so much that's going on that's contributing to learning. And if the emotional dysregulation is not there, and the social competence is off because of attachment, and all these things, and ability to be independent and self-reliant, if they can't do that, so chances are they can't learn, okay? So what can we do as teachers? Number one, we have to be a little more aware of the psychological backgrounds of our students. It's worth knowing a little about the emotional weight they're carrying into the classroom. Why? Because then we could be more attuned, and it's all about attunement. Number 2, it's our awareness of our power to connect and to make a difference. It can really make a difference. It's a pretty heady idea, right? And it could be so great that even when we're not with them, they've internalized it. Those become new internalized working models, but this time it's with Rebbitzin this, or Machanechet this, or history teacher this. The Gemara says that teaching children, the teachers of children are like stars. It actually says it for little children, but I wonder if you can adapt this. For little children, they're like stars. Why are they like stars? Because stars, you don't really see the stars. We would think they're like the sun or the moon. No, they're stars, because stars seem small. But what they're finding is if you really study stars, sometimes they're bigger than the sun and the moon. They're just so far away you don't see them. So you may not see the impact that you have on students right now, but there is an impact. Your face is there. They're looking at you every day for a few hours. You're in their mind, and that makes a difference, even if you don't see the effect now. When we provide a secure connection and a safe haven, children are more apt to explore, and that rewires the brain. We want to provide for them a secure attachment between the teacher and student so they can explore, they can ask questions, they can create new interests, they can believe that they can do something else in life. You're rewiring, you are agents in helping to rewire their brain. And you know, the Yogi Bear idea, it ain't over till it's over. So you never know. You just never know. There was a speaker, I think Y.Y. Jacobson, and I was told that he said something, and I don't want to mess it up, but the concept was that there is this very big, Morris Cohn, I think is the name, he's very big in the Chinese government, and he was very involved in the vote in the UN of convincing China to abstain. They say about this guy was such a lo yutzlach, and he didn't make, he was like kicked out of the community, sent to live on his own, got very involved in the Chinese community somehow, and became a major leader in the Chinese community. And it's like, he's a very funny speaker, but he said, can you imagine like Mrs. Combs sitting on Central Avenue with her friends? So what's your Morris up to? Oh, I don't know, you know, he's living somewhere in Chinatown, right? You know, oh, don't worry, I'm sure he'll be okay. Nebuch on you, right? And meanwhile, this guy saved the whole Jewish community. So you never know who's going to make it and who's not. Your job is just to connect and to be attuned, because you really never know. And you get to be partners in that change, and that's a very big deal. If you can say that about yourself, you know, after 120, you go up and say, yeah, I had a piece in that. It's a very big deal. So the Kotzker Rebbe always used to say the famous pasuk, "Chitzim biyad hagiburim came b'nei hanurim." As arrows in the hands of the mighty, so are the young. So who are the young here? And Rashi says it refers to the students. So why are the students described as arrows? So the Kotzker says because the closer you bring the arrow to yourself, the closer you bring the child to yourself, what happens? The farther it goes, right? And we live by that dictum. Again, the teacher, the morim, the horim, Torah, everything is intertwined. We're all agents, we're all working together. And that's why attachment is so important, because it's not just about parents. Teachers are parents. In our culture, in Yadus, the teacher is a parent, right? And I just want you to understand that once again, I guess I want to give you chizuk in your job, that you have so much potential here to help children. We say that nishama and neshama are the same word. One means desolation, and one means the soul. And what's the difference? So neshama, desolation is with a patach and a kametz, but neshama, the soul, is with two kametzes. And the difference between a kametz and a patach is that the kametz has an extra supporting line, has a vertical line which gives support. So the difference, you can make the difference oftentimes, not all the time, but you will have those cases over the course of your career where you can make really that difference in terms of, is this child going to be desolate? Or am I going to make a soul? Am I going to kick in and pick up the neshama, the tzeltzos of this child, and help him to develop into something that he'll be proud of himself, and Klal Yisrael will be proud of him, and he'll feel like he's secure, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he used to say about, he was a transmitter of the Mesorah, and it says, Hu hayam oneh shivcham, when it would come to his students, Hu hayam oneh shivcham, he would count, enumerate their praise. So it's the past or the present, okay? And the answer is that his greatness was that he was constantly enumerating their good qualities. It wasn't a one-time deal. It wasn't a past compliment. It was a constant enumeration, a constant noticing of these child. So to come back to our initial questions and ponder them and understand our own histories of attachment, processing them, getting to know ourselves better. We talked about all this. Healing our own wounds. And we all have wounds, and treating ourselves with self-compassion. You know, we're all doing the best we can. And the self-compassion is saying, yeah, it's hard for me in that classroom. That kid is really triggering something in me. And not blaming ourselves, just being aware and being self-compassionate that we're in a hard field. We're coming in every day. We've got to get this curriculum done. And what I guess I'm introducing to you is, yeah, but we also have another job here. We have a huge, huge job, and a very meaningful job. And to look at it as like every day is a new opportunity that you could really make a difference. Every day brings with it the opportunity for new encounters, and those encounters, one by one, combine to make a difference in a child's life. So I wish you luck as you do that, and I know you'll be terrific, but I hope this has helped you to just give you a different perspective on things, and a broader perspective. Do you have any questions? No questions? Okay. All right. It was so nice speaking to you. How do we shut this off? Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.